entered the evidence room, I asked him to show his card, sir. Yes, and how did Detective Goodman respond? He suddenly pulled a knife on me. Something about the officer's story puzzled me. If the man had his ID card, why didn't he just show it? Yes, he would have needed it to enter the evidence room, so he must have been carrying it. The answer is simple. He couldn't show it. As you can see, Detective Goodman's picture is on his ID card. Oh, I get it. If he showed that, his cover would have been blown. Officer Meekins would have realized the man wasn't Detective Goodman. Do you have anything to say to this, Officer Marshall? You've got quite an imagination, partner. We got a term for that. It's called circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence? He's still denying it. You're going to have to do better than that to break a detective. Unless you have hard evidence proving I dressed up as the victim. I can't say I particularly care for your uncooperative disposition. I can't say I care for your beard, but you don't see me complaining. Well, Mr. Wright, do you have any evidence? Any evidence proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Officer Marshall dressed up as the victim? Well, who am I kidding? I don't have anything like that. I can see the fear in your eyes, partner. Seems you're the one who couldn't take the desert heat. This can't be happening. It's so obvious he's the one. What can I do? It looks like your lack of experience has finally been exposed. I'll pass on to you what someone told me when I was just starting out. When you run into a wall with no place to go, return to the basics. The basics? For me, that would be what Mia used to tell me. Nick, try thinking outside of the box. I shouldn't look for proof that Officer Marshall was in disguise, but rather I should look for evidence that came about because he was in disguise. Why do you think this locker was open in the first place? What do you mean? There's no reason for Officer Marshall to open his locker at the time of the crime. Yet he did, despite the chance it might be discovered later, as it has been. Which means he didn't originally plan to open his locker. According to the defense's argument, Officer Jake Marshall dressed up as Detective Goodman at the time of the crime. Then, after the crime was committed, he opened his own locker for some unknown reason. The fact that a white cloth is sticking out of the locker seems to indicate that he opened it in order to put the cloth inside. So, just what exactly is this piece of cloth? Perhaps the video is the key to all our unanswered questions. I don't have any evidence, so this video is my only shot. Very well. Let's take yet another look at the security tape. After committing the crime, the witness opened the locker to put away the cloth. Please show us why the witness had to open his locker. Alright. Gotta fast forward a little bit. Right there. Look at all that. Oops. Rewind back a little bit. Take that! For some reason, you disguised yourself as Detective Goodman and entered the evidence room. I don't know what that reason was. Yet. However, something unexpected happened. Officer Meekins barged in on you. When asked to show your ID card, you pulled a knife on him. However, Officer Meekins panicked, and the white coat you were wearing was soiled with blood. A bloody white coat? You couldn't just walk out like that, so you hid the coat in your locker. Not bad, huh, partner? Now then, Officer Marshall, are you ready to tell us the truth? Looks like I underestimated you. I hope you're happy now, Mr. Edgeworth. 2 years ago, if you were only half as persistent then as you are today, we all wouldn't have to be here now, would we? Officer Marshall, tell the court what you did. All of it. All right. It seems the time has come. All right, here we go. I had to do it that day. I just couldn't stand by and let it die. I stole the detective's ID and dressed like him. I planned to take out the evidence. I wasn't expecting Officer Meekins. I knocked him out and managed to escape. I knew which areas wouldn't be caught on the camera. There wasn't any murder in the evidence room at 5:15. So, the supposed victim was really you. But there's one thing I still don't understand. Large quantities of blood traces were found on the floor of the evidence room. If no one was murdered, then how could that be? Officer Meekins managed to cut his own hand. My guess is he's the donor. It looked like too much blood for that. Alright, pretty much we're just gonna press everything here.
Hold it!
When you say it, you mean... Do you even have to ask, partner? The SL9 incident. 2 years have passed since that case was closed. It was going to completely end with the transferal that day. Not if I had anything to do with it. That incident's not over. But what did you hope to accomplish by sneaking into the evidence room? When a case is closed, only the detective who is in charge of it can look through the evidence. I wanted to have a look at it myself one more time, no matter what the cost. I don't care what anyone says, partner. That case is mine. But Officer Marshall wasn't in charge of that investigation. Why does he care so much about it? That day was my last chance. That's why and it goes back into the testimony.
Hold it!
Why did you disguise yourself as Detective Goodman? If I didn't make it look like Goodman was carrying out the evidence transferal, I'd be arrested for stealing evidence, which wouldn't get me anywhere. So you did it to fool the security camera. And the detective's ID card? I stole that in the morning of the incident. So that really was why Goodman started filling out that lost item report. I returned his ID card. I left it on the floor in the prosecutor's office pocket lot. The ID card I found was left there by Officer Marshall. So essentially, you managed to succeed despite your lack of foresight. What do you mean, partner? I mean the fingerprint-activated lock, of course. No matter how well you disguise yourself, you can't change your fingerprints. Normally, that locker shouldn't have opened. So it opened because a rubber glove was stuck in the door by chance? Then Detective Goodman must have opened the locker before Officer Marshall. Interesting.
Hold it!
You pulled a knife on Officer Meekins and tried to drive him off? Let's just say I was a little surprised. I only planned on being in the evidence room for no more than 5 minutes. I didn't think anyone would actually come in during that short time. Officer Meekins, certainly a one-in-a-million type of person. Mistaking a detective for an intruder and demanding to be shown his ID. I'll have to think a little more about his ways this year. When did Edgeworth get so much influence? Anyway, he threw himself at me and I ended up cutting him slightly. I'm sorry it had to turn out that way. With me knocking him out and everything. By the way, what happened to your knife? Oh, you mean this one? Hold on a second. I don't know what to say. So what happened next?
Hold it!
So you did your research beforehand. Those who go into the desert unprepared don't live long, partner. I didn't think it would make a difference, though. The security tape is erased every 6 hours. If all had gone as planned, no footage would have been left. However, you bloodied your coat in your struggle with Officer Meekins. If someone was in the security room when I came out, the jig would have been up. I opened my locker and stashed it in there. What was Officer Megan's doing during that time? What else? He was sleeping like a baby. What you're saying is, on that day... Da-di-da-di-da.
Hold it!
But the blood found at the scene certainly indicates a crime took place. What are you, blind? The victim shown on that tape is me. I'm not dead yet, partner. So you stole the evidence from the locker. Actually, no, I didn't. Why not? When I opened the locker, the evidence was already gone. What? Mr. Edward, where is that evidence? It's still missing, Your Honor. Detective Goodman's locker was already empty. Someone else stole the evidence. Officer Marshall, may I ask you one thing? Fire away, partner. It's a free country. Just remember, I'm also free to decide whether or not to answer. Why did you do this? Stealing a detective's ID, injuring a police officer. This is no small offense! Moreover, you're an officer yourself. This will have serious consequences. It can't just be forgiven with a simple cut in salary. Not that salary cuts are ever a valid solution. Like I said, this isn't your case. This one is mine. And I'll do anything it takes to get an answer I'm satisfied with. The witness has an unusual amount of zeal. Let's hear more. I can't just forget the SL9 incident. You know why? I think I know why. Objection!
Objection!
Officer Marshall, I think I understand. I think I know why you care so much about the SL9 incident. Sounds like you've been sipping too much cactus juice, partner. I have the SL9 incident file here. The name, Marshall, is mentioned here. In a list of murder victims. Neil Marshall. Are you related to this man? Neil Marshall? Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the name. 2 years ago, he received the same lousy prosecutor award you got. What? A prosecutor? He must be talking about the King of Prosecutors Award. Now I remember. Prosecutor Neil Marshall. He handled the SL9 case before I did. That's right. He was killed, and the case fell into your hands. But what's his relation to you? He was my brother. He was investigating the murders with Damon Gann, chief detective at the time. The group of detectives I was part of worked under them. We were desperate to prosecute the killer. Joe Doc. My brother fought Doc and was killed. That was the first time Doc had left behind any evidence. That was all we needed. He was arraigned and incarcerated. The case was finally closed, at least according to the public records. What do you mean? My brother couldn't have been killed by Joe Doc. I knew my brother better than anyone. No one could have beaten him in a fight. And that's it? That's your reason for your insane actions? There's more to my brother's death than what the records say. No matter how much you try to hide it, you can't fool me. Well, at least one thing's for certain. Now we know what happened at the police department on the day of the crime. That was the last day the SL9 case could be reopened. Not satisfied with its resolution, Officer Marshall planned to steal the evidence. Disguising himself as Detective Goodman, he entered the evidence room. Officer Meekins confronted him, so he rendered him unconscious and fled. Yes, this mystery has finally been cleared up. No murder took place at the police department that day. The things that happen by chance never cease to amaze. at exactly the same time as the murder at the prosecutor's office. This fake murder was going on at the police department. Chance? It's got to be more than that. So if no one was murdered at the police department on the day of the crime, that means the murder in the prosecutor's office parking lot was the real one.